Arcade Heroes.
Greetings, it's Adam with ArcadeHeroes.com without a camera, so instead you'll just have to look at this static, almost stock photo frame picture of myself there. I mean, who needs to see the talking head anyways? But we got some pinball news to discuss, as it's been a little while since I've done one of these news headline videos. My webcam broke, something went wrong with the wiring, so I just need to order a new one. Since the last time that I did one of these. But yeah, some pinball stuff to talk about is always nice, right? And so if you've been plugged into the pinball scene at all, then you'll know that there's been a bit of news to talk about aside from just Avatar there. We'll start with the one that came out a couple of days ago, or sorry, not a couple, last week. And that is Stern's The Uncanny X-Men Revealed. Now, I'll avoid watching trailers and all that, as chances are if you're here, you've already seen all that. I do like how this game looks as far as the flow goes. The lead design behind this is Jack Danger, the pinball player extraordinaire who has been at Stern Pinball for a little while already, and he did the Foo Fighters. He started off with the home model to Jurassic Park, but I would note that, because I've heard some people talking about home models and such, but it doesn't seem like Stern is interested in pursuing more home models. It looks like that Jurassic Park is the only one, but I'm sure they have to be careful as to how many they produce there. It'd be interesting to see their numbers. But anyways, this new X-Men is actually the second time that Stern Pinball has tackled the IP, which of course is owned by Marvel, which is owned by Disney. But this particular theme for it uses the Days of Future Past and Mind Out of Time storylines, which the Days of Future Past started back in 1980 from what research I did, where I grew up a little bit watching or I guess I was more of a teenager already, but I remember watching a little bit of the X-Men cartoon series that used to be on regular over-the-air TV before such a thing as streaming existed, and that Days of Future Past storyline was somewhere in there. I can't remember where, but I do remember watching that. Mind Out of Time I'm not really familiar with, although maybe I am, just not by what its title is. But overall, that's where this one falls into play, and so that's where Wolverine and I think Jean Grey, maybe it's the rest of the X-Men, it's been a long time since I've seen it, go back in time, but history has changed, and so they have to work to correct things, because of course the way that history has changed has made life much worse for mutants, and so they're basically illegal and hunted down and killed. If I recall correctly, you have those giant sentinel robots and stuff that chase mutants down, which of course are represented on the playfield, as you can see here from the lower playfield. And this is something that stands out as far as what makes this game unique, is you have these three flippers at the bottom, and the game itself, as far as the layout goes, it's basically the same between the Ellie and the Pro models. Ellie would also include the premium models, and so there's like no drastic changes as far as the layout of everything goes. I mean, obviously Ellie has some extra bells and whistles, including the Sentinel robot hands, which have some cool effects. Like with this one over on the right hand side, it will actually cause the whole ramp to move, and so that can disrupt the flow of the pinball when it's going down there. But with these loops that you have on the ramps and this one over here, it looks like it's a lot of fun to hit those loop shots. To me, that's always one of the more pleasurable parts of pinball, is when you have some nice loop shots that aren't a nightmare to get, but are relatively easy to get. I mean, sure, it's fine if they still require some skill, But when you can get these loops and these combos going, that is what usually makes for a fun game, in my opinion. But the one thing I would say with this layout is if you've never played a game where the positioning of the flippers is offset from the center, which you would probably be used to them being in the center, then this game will throw you off. I even though I haven't played it yet, I've played games where things are offset. In fact, on my Irata Non Grata channel, I posted some videos of the Atari pinball machines that were at California Extreme, and I still need to finish a video on that about the prototype games that were there. But with a couple of their games, they had the flippers in very off-center places, particularly a game called Time 2000 where it has two sets of flippers, but both of them are not in the exact center of the play field. It's almost like there's two play fields with where they're at, and it really throws your mind for a loop, and you're expecting it to go straight down the center, but then it's like way off. And then of course where you have two of these, your brain has to retrain itself basically when you're playing a game like this to know when to be hitting it properly. And so don't be surprised if this one feels a little weird, but I would say still give it a chance. So let yourself adapt to the different feel of where your muscle memory might be before writing it off, and see how those loop shots go. And then here's a photo of the premium and LE version of the Sentinel hand. In the Pro version, it's just a plastic cutout. It doesn't do anything special there. But you can see how the ramp is not exactly connected there. And so you have this mechanized portion down here so that it can kind of grab or disrupt the ball, knock it off of there instead of hitting that full shot. You've got your rules card here, which looks like there's plenty to do within the game. And speaking of that, plenty to do. Here's the features list where, as you can see, most of the features are the same between all the models. It's only just up here at the top, mainly with the Sentinel head bash toy and the hands that would be different between them. The LE, it's more aesthetic stuff. And so that one is starting to ship out already, I believe, in the LE models. Stern has decided to reward their LE customers by shipping those out first. The LE ones do cost more, of course, and so buyers will be getting those here soon. But then, around the same time that X-Men was teased, Jersey Jack Pinball started teasing their next game. And so, as we already saw there a moment ago, this is all on ArcadeHeroes.com. You have today, Avatar: The Battle for Pandora was revealed, and this one is also shipping. Now, instead of coming in a Pro, Premium, and Limited Edition model, Jersey Jack has always been a little bit different. I mean, they've done 3 models before, but they've had their own name schemes going on, where in the past they've done Standard, Limited Edition, and Collector's Edition. I think for a time they tried something that was Premium, but can't remember which one that might have been. Or models that might have been. But nowadays they've stuck to just making 2, and that would be the limited edition and the collector's edition. Now both of these are limited as to how many units they have, and I should mention this while it just popped into my brain. The limited edition for the Uncanny X-Men is locked in at 811 units. And that is referring to the comic book. I think it was Earth 811 was where all that was happening. And so that's why they picked that odd number there. But for Avatar, the production limitations are 5,000 for the limited edition model and then 1,000 for the collector's edition model. And the differences between the two, there are none between how the playfields actually are laid out and play, and that's pretty typical of Jersey Jack. I can't really recall where they've done some drastic difference between the models as far as gameplay goes. It's usually aesthetic. I mean, obviously there's always the differences in artwork. This is new hand-drawn artwork. Per the deep dive video, I can't remember the name of the artist. Apologies there. But they have different toppers, where the CE has a holographic topper, and then there's more, or I think they call that red, green, and blue, or RGB. UV inks embedded into all the artwork on the collector's edition, whereas the limited edition still has UV lighting effects, as the main game designer was saying how he wanted it. You'd feel like you're playing the game at night, and it lights that up really well. It's just certain things will stand out a little bit more on the collector's edition. And also, as you can see, it has kind of these tiger stripes on the armor of the collector's edition. That is also a nicety that you only get with that one. And from what they said in the deep dive video, the patterns on these are not going to be the same. And so every single collector's edition will have a slightly different pattern, one to another there, which is a cool little touch. And also on top of that, on this picture here, you can see the dragon beast thing. I forget their name. I watched Avatar once. I never saw the sequel, so I don't remember all the names of everything. But one of the dragon beast things, they actually have 6 different models of this 3D sculpted toy there. And so which one your machine will come with, you'll just have to wait and see. But the pricing on these two, it's $12,000 for the limited edition, $15,000 for the collector's edition. That is MSRP, and so you might get a little bit of flexibility depending on your distributor. It's just from what I have experienced in the past when I used to sell arcade machines, which included pinball machines, was that the margins that you were allowed on pinball machines were very, very small. And particularly when you have an MSRP that's put out there that everybody can read and see, it also doesn't allow a lot of leeway. So you're usually talking like a wiggle room of a couple $100, maybe, if that. Maybe a few $100 depending on the model and the manufacturer. But again, you're generally not going to have somebody out there that's selling like a limited edition for $9,000 right when it's coming off the production line. I mean, if the game doesn't sell well or if it's bad, then sure, it might drop to something like that a few years down the road. But generally speaking, not right as it comes out. Whereas I guess I should mention on the pricing for the Uncanny X-Men, the pros were starting at somewhere, I think it was around $8,000. Let's take a quick look. Okay, over on Stern, okay, I'm sorry. It was $7,000 for the Pro. Then let's go over to Premium. That one's $9,699, so practically $10,000 after freight. And then limited edition is sitting at a cool $13,000 plus freight and tax, and that would be the case on all of those. And so where Jersey Jack's limited edition pricing is under Stern's, but then of course Jersey Jack has what's their limited edition comparable to Stern's is their collector edition, and then that one is higher. But that is typical of Jersey Jack, as they do tend to make more premium style machines as opposed to paring things down, which works for locations. I'll get back to pricing here in a minute, but the specs on the Avatar one, it has 6 flippers with 3 of them large, 3 mini ones, 6 balls, 6 ramps, 3 slingshots. There's some scoop targets, a playfield magnet. Uncanny X-Men also has a playfield magnet. Obviously, you need that with Magneto. But this one has 2 lower playfields, which according to the deeper dive video, it says is a first for a pinball machine. I'll take them at their word for that. And it is interesting to me what they did with these. They do connect to each other. So the first lower playfield has a pop bumper, and so you want to try it. Hope that, or maybe kind of give a little bit of English to the pinball machine, so to speak, to help bounce the ball to hit all the targets. And then when it comes down here, you have 2 of the mini flippers in the lower playfield where you can fight the humans. Okay, so that monster beast thing up there is a Banshee sculpture. Okay. Also has lines recorded by actor Stephen Lang, who played Colonel Quaritch in the films and clips from both films. But that is something to note, is that while this does have stuff from both movies, the artwork and the game modes and all sorts of stuff in it are mostly focused on the sequel, which makes sense. It is a bit newer and fresher in people's minds, and it expanded on the lore of the universe and all that, by my understanding, so it makes sense for them to have a little stronger focus there. And then again, the CE model just has some extra niceties, including the arrow shooter rod instead of your plain shooter rod. I already mentioned the holographic topper. There's more lighting in the back box, and of course I mentioned the UV lights and the armor stuff. Again, I won't watch this here because it's 18 minutes long, and so you can do that. But I did want to get into some thoughts, some quick thoughts. I'll try and make it. I was spending a bit of time there on the pricing already, and this is something that I mentioned on the blog both here as well as with a recent post where I was talking about both of these games, the Battle of the Pins here on Arcade Heroes. And here's another shot from Avatar which shows the UV lighting in place. That was an early teaser shot that Jersey Jack had shared back when Stern had put out the Uncanny X-Men teaser. But overall, the issue, it comes back to something that I've talked about previously. And so when it comes to operating pinball machines, it's just a huge challenge. And the higher that the prices go on these games, the harder it becomes to justify investing into one for putting out on location. Now, I have heard something recent saying that about 75% of pinball sales go to home consumers. Now, I don't know how accurate that is, but I have heard from different employees from different pinball manufacturers in the past that it was well above 50%. And so whether that holds true between every single manufacturer, I don't know. But anecdotally, I would say it's a pretty safe guess to say that this is fairly accurate, or if it's not exactly there, it's pretty close. One thing that I've noticed is that, because I've been around for a while, is that Jersey Jack, when they started back in 2012, they were very operator focused. I remember visiting their booth for the first time, and they were talking about all this and that feature to appeal to operators so that it would earn more on location, et cetera, et cetera. But I've noticed that as time has gone on, they've moved away from that almost completely, and they don't really talk about operators much, which is a little sad, given that Jack Guarnieri, it was an operator for many, many years. But you know, you have to adapt in business to where your market is, and the market is with the pinball collector more so, much more so than it is the pinball operator. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't pinball operators out there, or like I have pinball machines, and plenty of bar arcades have them out there. It's just, as I've talked about on the channel before and on the blog, there are some places where pinball does better than others. Like in the northwestern region of the United States and within the Chicago area, those would be the two strongholds for pinball, where it almost doesn't matter what pinball you put out, it can make some money. And I've heard some numbers before from pinballs operating in Seattle, or the Seattle area, where I was astounded by how much money they were making. It was like, wow, that sounds more like a video game than it does a pinball machine. It's just everywhere else, if you don't live in one of those regions, and when I say Northwest, it seems to be more like between Portland and Seattle areas, so it doesn't necessarily mean that everywhere in the Northwest it's a guaranteed lock, but at least in those areas it seems to do well. And of course, bar arcades, it can do all right too. But I have talked with multiple operators that are not within those regions. Like, I know one very well in Wisconsin. I talked to one fairly regularly in Nevada, and there's been one who I think he was based out of Idaho, and a couple of other spots here and there where it's like, it does okay, but it doesn't do amazing like the hype seems to proclaim. Or actually, there's another operator here in Utah that I talk with once in a while, and he runs a pure bar arcade. It's very, very heavy on pinball, but it still is struggling. And so, again, it's not a guarantee that if you mix alcohol and pinball that it's going to make you a millionaire or anything. So please don't get that impression. And that's the reason why I harp on this, is just because it's frustrating. I would love to see pinball be able to stand on its own and make a lot of money without needing to resell it a few years down the road to try and get your investment back. Because that's the current line of thinking, is like, well, yeah, sure, it doesn't earn on location, but wait a couple of years and then resell it, you'll make your money back. And it's like, well, okay, but that's not why I should be buying something. The reason why you buy something for your business is so that it makes money now, helps you pay your bills now and your employees now, as opposed to a couple of years down the road. Especially if you make your same money back, if you're lucky. That's not always a guarantee. What if you lose money on it? Then that's not helping either. I did have a little bit of a discussion with a reader in the Arcade Heroes comments section there, where he was pushing back a little bit on some of the things that I was talking about within the rant post, and I agree with his analysis. The challenge with pinball is that for it to earn on location, it would have to become severely dumbed down. But the problem is that if you have a super majority of buyers, let's say it is 75% of potential pinball buyers, what do they want out of a game that's going to cost thousands of dollars? They don't want a skee ball game. They want a pinball machine that has a deep rule set, that has a lot of cool stuff in it and ideas, and that will keep them coming back and playing it, so that they feel that they're getting their money's worth out of that investment and not just buying a machine to flip it a few years down the road. I mean, sure, there are flippers within the collector community and all that, but that's not why I'd say most people invest into pinball. But of course, with deep rule sets and the more complex that the game is, while it's very appealing to collectors, you put it into a location, and I've seen this with my own eyes more times than I can count, where it's absolutely baffling to somebody like a kid or somebody who's never heard of pinball before. And I've had many people ask me over the years, I know this is anecdotal, but it's happened to me plenty of times, where I get asked, what is this? Or how do I play this? Or I once had a Hispanic gentleman come to the front desk with something translated, and he says, how do you win? On the translator. I think he meant, how do you play? Just because, like, the themes, yes, they can draw people in, but then they still don't know what to make of it. It's like, sure, that's Star Wars, or it's some Marvel property, or it's Avatar, or whatever, and I like that, and so that made me look at this machine. But now I see this complex series of artworks and squares and ramps and all these things. It's like, what on earth am I supposed to do with all this? And so again, this is for the casual player. In fact, yesterday we had one of the weirdest things that I've had on a pinball machine was somebody asked if Addams Family was based on a movie. It's like, okay, well, I guess you've been living under a rock or something. But yeah, so there's lots of potential customers out there that would come into an arcade who just really have no idea what it is, and that's why it's like I wouldn't mind seeing maybe a lesser than pro model that is very simple, and seeing how that goes, but it also comes in at a much lower cost, and see if that would do any better than your limited edition ones. Because that's another thing too that I've witnessed many times, is that there's no earnings difference, at least in my location, between pro models and premium models. Even though the premium models usually, not always, but usually play better and have more to do, it just makes no difference. But when you're a business owner and you're looking at this, and it's like, well, I spent X amount of thousands of dollars on this pro, but then I spent an additional $2,000 for this premium, and yet the premium, I don't see any difference in the and what I spent there. Now, there's no other product in this industry that I can think of, video game, crane machine, redemption machine, where if you're paying an extra amount for it, where it's making the exact same thing as the other model, and that's okay. But just nobody finds that to be something that's worth letting slide. But of course, with pinball, again, since most of the buyers are in the collector mentality, that's doesn't hold the same water that it does. Kind of, I guess, wraps up the pinball rant. Again, I really do want to see pinball succeed on location, not just with collectors. I am happy that it's there with collectors. I guess part of the concern, though, is that, is that a bubble? Will that hold forever? Particularly where recently the economy has not been great. This summer for myself has been one of the worst summers that I have ever seen. And it's a bit concerning just because I still have bills to pay, and yet the money's not coming in like it normally does for this time of year, and things are down like 23-25% from the norm that we expect, or even just compared to last year. And so when that's the case and you're looking for a new product to help revitalize things, a $12,000 pinball machine or even an $8,000 pinball machine, it just doesn't really cross my mind. So it's like, would I put either the X-Men or Avatar into my arcade? If I had more money than I knew what to do with, sure. If I was Elon Musk, sure, not a problem. Wouldn't think twice about it. But in the mentality that I have right now, or the situation is probably a better word to use, no, not at all. I would much rather, if I was going to buy something, I would be going for something that's already proven itself, guaranteed to do very well and make a profit quick, because that's more what I need right now than something that just might work as what I've called indirect income. As I've mentioned this on other videos, pinball is great for that indirect income to bring people in to the arcade, or maybe the father of a family, but they bring their kids in and the kids go and play something else while the dad plays the pinball machine. And so that wouldn't have happened if the pinball machine wasn't there. But again, that still is difficult to spend that much money on something that's indirect income as opposed to a product where it could directly be generating revenue plus the indirect income just by nature of what it is. But anyways, I've ranted for long enough here. We're almost at 30 minutes, but thank you for watching this video. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and we'll catch you on the next one.